Traditionally, it was recommended that trainees should rest around 30 to 90 seconds between sets to maximize muscle growth. However, is this rest period range really best for hypertrophy, or should we be resting shorter or longer between sets? In this video, we will try to answer these questions. First, let's see what the overall evidence suggests is best for muscle growth. The best evidence we have on this topic is this systematic review which compiled the evidence on rest periods for hypertrophy. The researchers compiled all the available studies which compared short rest periods, defined as 60 seconds or less, versus long rest periods, defined as anything greater than 60 seconds. It was found that on average, the longer rest periods promoted superior muscle growth, shown in the orange, compared with the short rest, shown in the blue. However, the variability in muscle growth in the short rest group was significant. If we look at the 95% confidence intervals of each group, we can see that the long rest periods tended to result in more predictable outcomes with not much variability between studies, whereas short rest periods resulted in very large variability in muscle growth between studies. With short rest periods, some studies reported decreases in muscle size, while others reported double the average growth found with longer rest periods. Because of this, I think it is worth diving a little deeper into this topic. Some of this variability may be due to the nature of the exercises we train with. In other words, whether we are training with compound or isolation lifts. In general, longer rest periods tend to result in superior growth when training with most compound lifts. For example, this study compared the use of 1 versus 3 minute interset rest periods on muscle growth. Trainees performed this full body training program 3 times per week for 8 weeks. As we can see, all exercises are compound lifts apart from the leg extension. One group rested 1 minute between sets, while the other group rested 3 minutes between sets. And as we can see in the orange bars, the group resting longer saw superior growth of all muscles measured. So this study falls in line with the overall body of evidence. However, these same results are not always seen in all studies. When it comes to isolation lifts, we generally see less of a difference in muscle growth between short versus long rest periods, and sometimes we see superior growth with short rests. For example, this study explored the effects of training with different rest periods and loads during arm training. Trainees performed 3 sets of 3 biceps and 3 triceps exercises 3 times per week for 8 weeks. One group trained using an 8 RM load with 3 minutes rest between sets, while the other group trained using a 20 RM load with only 30 seconds rest between sets. It was found that cross-sectional area of the arms was superior in the short rest group, shown in the orange, compared with the long rest, shown in the blue. Although it should be noted that these results may have also been influenced by the load and rep ranges used. As we mentioned, the effects of interset rest periods on hypertrophy may be somewhat determined by exercise selection, whether we are performing a compound or isolation lift. A reason that this may be the case is due to limitations from other systems, namely the cardiorespiratory system. This refers to delivery of oxygen to our working muscles during exercise via the heart, lungs, and blood vessels. For the purposes of muscle growth, the goal is to maximally stress the target muscle with each set. So we want to take each set close to failure with the intent to fatigue a specific muscle group. In other words, fatigue of the target muscle should be the only factor which limits performance of each set, not any other system. However, the cardiorespiratory system is also fatigued to some extent when lifting, and the extent to which it is fatigued can be influenced by how long we rest between sets. If we rest shorter, there is less time for the cardiorespiratory system to recover, and if we rest longer, it has more time to recover. Furthermore, the cardiorespiratory system will be more or less fatigued depending on the exercise we perform. Free weight compound lifts such as squats, deadlifts, and barbell rows generally have higher cardiorespiratory demands. This is probably because they involve more muscles to move and stabilize the body, requiring additional oxygen. Whereas machine-based isolation lifts such as curls, tricep extensions, and calf raises generally have much lower cardiorespiratory demands. This is because there is really only one primary muscle working and minimal stabilizers required during the lift. In terms of rest periods, this means that we might want to adjust rest times depending on the exercise we are performing. This is to ensure the cardiorespiratory system has enough time to recover so that it doesn't limit performance before the target muscle. In general, we should probably allow slightly longer rest periods for free weight compound lifts, whereas both shorter and longer rest periods won't really influence cardiorespiratory fatigue for machine-based isolation lifts. Another area where we see conflicting evidence regarding rest periods is when we compare traditional training versus metabolite style training. Traditional training can be thought of as how most people typically train in the gym. We perform a set, rest for a given amount of time, perform another set, and so on. Metabolite training, on the other hand, is not really a well-defined term, but it can generally be described as training methods which involve minimal rest periods, lighter loads, and a close proximity to failure. Some examples of metabolite training include drop sets, rest pause, myo reps, cluster sets, supersets, and pre-fatigue. In general, we find that most metabolite training methods can be similarly effective for muscle growth compared with traditional training, despite usually involving shorter rest periods. This meta-analysis compiled the totality of evidence comparing drop sets versus traditional training on muscle growth. In this forest plot, the squares to the left of the midline show studies which found superior muscle growth using traditional training, and any squares to the right of the midline show studies which found superior growth using drop sets. When combining all studies, the net effect is shown with this orange diamond, and as we can see, this crosses the midline. This indicates that the sum of the 5 studies we have on this topic showed no significant benefit of either traditional or drop set training for muscle growth. And if anything, there appears to be a slight benefit in favor of drop sets. And as we know, drop sets involve minimal rest periods, while traditional training involves longer rest periods. So once again, this conflicts with the body of evidence on rest periods, providing some evidence that short rest may be just as effective for muscle growth in the context of some metabolite training methods. Another variable which may influence interset rest times is the absolute strength level of the lifter. Lifting heavier loads simply requires more work to be performed per set. Even if we compare the same relative strength of 2 lifters, the one who is lifting more absolute load requires more total energy to complete each set. For example, let's say 2 lifters perform a set of 8 reps for back squats. One lifter uses 40 kilos while the other lifter uses 80 kilos. Even if both lifters have similar relative strength, the lifter using more load takes more energy to complete each set compared with the lifter using less load. Because of the higher work demands from lifting heavier loads, this would probably result in more metabolic and cardiorespiratory fatigue, which would require longer rest periods to recover between sets. So in most cases, bigger and stronger lifters may require slightly longer rest periods between sets to maximize muscle growth. Although it should be noted that this is more hypothetical, not something that has been directly studied. Another consideration regarding rest periods is time efficiency. In other words, how much of a hypertrophic stimulus we can provide within a given time frame. So there are 2 ways that time efficiency can be improved. First is by providing a superior hypertrophic stimulus, and second is by reducing the amount of time it takes to complete your workout. Since most people don't have infinite time to train each session and have a limited number of workouts they can perform each week, time efficiency is a very important consideration for most trainees. Rest periods are probably the single variable which has the largest impact on our workout duration. We generally spend the majority of time resting during our workouts as opposed to lifting. For example, let's say we were to perform 5 exercises for 4 sets each during a workout, for a total of 20 sets in the session. And let's say rest periods were 2 minutes between each set, and each set took 1 minute to complete to make things simple. This would result in 20 minutes of actual lifting, 40 minutes of resting for a total workout duration of 60 minutes. So if we cut down our rest periods, we would significantly reduce our total session duration. For example, if we took the same session and implemented 1.5 minutes rest instead of 2 minutes, our work time would still be 20 minutes, but our resting time would be 30 minutes for a total session duration of 50 minutes. So with this extra 10 minutes of time saved, we could either get on with the rest of our day sooner, or we could perform more sets and potentially see superior growth. So reducing rest periods can have 2 effects on the time efficiency equation. On one hand, we reduce our total session duration. This is a positive as it allows us to accumulate more volume in the same time frame, which will generally have a positive effect on muscle growth. And on the other hand, we may be seeing a slightly detrimental effect on muscle growth per set in some cases. Like we have discussed, the decrease in muscle growth is probably more of an issue for free weight compound lifts, but doesn't seem to be much of a concern for machine-based isolation lifts. So depending on the specific situation, shorter rest periods could be seen as having a positive or negative effect on time efficiency. Although in most cases, I would say that reducing rest periods will have an overall net positive effect on time efficiency for the majority of exercises. Based on all this information, let's now establish some practical recommendations. Overall, we have some conflicting evidence regarding rest periods for muscle growth. The overall evidence finds a slightly superior effect in favour of longer rest periods. However, there is some evidence showing neutral or even superior growth with shorter rest periods. This may be explained by the nature of the exercise performed, and what systems limit performance. Longer rest periods generally seem to be more effective when training with free weight compound lifts. This may be because of the higher cardiorespiratory demands, which could potentially limit performance before the target muscle without sufficient rest. Whereas shorter rest periods seem to be similarly or potentially even more effective for machine-based isolation lifts compared with longer rest. This may be because the target muscle will always limit performance during these exercises, as cardiorespiratory demands are much lower. And it should also be noted that the exact rest periods taken between sets may slightly differ between lifters. Stronger lifters will probably require longer rests. This is because lifting heavier absolute loads simply requires more energy to complete each set. So there is greater metabolic and cardiorespiratory fatigue, which needs a longer time to recover. Furthermore, rest periods can have a major influence on time efficiency. Reducing rest times can significantly shorten our workout duration. This may have a small negative effect on the hypertrophic stimulus for some exercises, but will also allow more volume to be performed in the same time frame. Here are some general practical guidelines to follow, which will provide a good hypertrophic stimulus without making your training sessions unnecessarily long in duration. For free weight compound lifts, such as squats, pull-ups, and deadlift variations, we should probably allow around 2 to 4 minutes rest between sets for most people. For machine-based isolation lifts, such as bicep curls, calf raises, and lateral raises, we can allow shorter rest periods, less than around 90 seconds. And for exercises between these two extremes, such as seated cable row, leg press, or dumbbell overhead press, around 1 to 2 minutes rest is probably a good general range. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Check out flowhighperformance.com for online coaching, training templates, ebooks, and more.